You ever get the feeling that some people were born just to look down on others? I used to think that was just a saying. You know, some poetic way of describing arrogance. But that was before I met Nathan Kells. This man quite literally looked down on people. Not just metaphorically, he owned the tallest building in our city. His office, a pristine throne of glass and polished steel, sat perched on the very top floor. You could see everything from up there. The river, the skyline, even the little street where I grew up. And that was the problem. Because directly across from his sky palace, at the corner of 12th and Hanover, stood a house. A mismatched, sagging thing of peeling paint and stubborn brick. The kind of place that made realtors twitch and city planners grumble. But to me, and to one man in particular, that house meant something. It belonged to Eli Mercer. Eli was 82, give or take, and had lived in that house since the Beatles were still new. His late wife had once called it a scrapbook with a roof, and that's exactly what it was. Every creak in the floorboards had a memory. Every dent in the wall, a story. The backyard wasn't landscaped, it was loved into shape. The house didn't shine, but it meant something. And for 4 decades, Eli kept it alive with his bare hands and stubborn heart. But Nathan? Nathan saw an eyesore. I guess when your empire is built on sleek tech, polished optics, and investor confidence, a weathered little home across the street can feel like a mosquito bite. Annoying, insignificant, but always there. So, one morning he got this brilliant idea. I still remember the notification popping up. Live. CEO Nathan Kells cleans up the view. The thumbnail was him, smug as hell, holding a remote like he was launching a rocket. You could see the bulldozers idling in the background. I clicked in, half expecting a prank. Maybe he'd plant some trees, maybe cover the house with a billboard or something equally obnoxious. Nope, he bulldozed the damn thing, live, laughing, streaming. Just cleaning up the neighborhood, he joked. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash with the comment section cheering it on. People spammed emojis and memes, his followers ate it up, until the camera panned and caught something that wasn't supposed to be part of the show. Eli. He stood in the middle of the rubble like he didn't know where he was. Dust in his hair. A ripped flannel shirt. One hand trembling, holding a framed photograph that had somehow survived the chaos. His wife. I don't know if it was the look in his eyes or the way his fingers clutched the glass like it was oxygen, but in that instant, everything changed. The comments slowed, the laughter stuttered, and somewhere, buried beneath the rubble, the internet's conscience woke up. That was the moment this story stopped being a joke. But what happened next? That's when things got complicated. I don't know if you've ever stood in front of a smoking crater where your life used to be, but Eli Mercer did. And he didn't scream. He didn't punch anyone. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, still as stone, in a cloud of drywall dust and crushed memories, holding half of a torn photo of his wife. I think that's what haunted people the most, that he didn't fight back. Because when you've already lost everything that matters, what's left to protect? The video went viral, of course. At first, it was the usual memes, reaction clips, influencers using Eli's shock for punchlines. But a funny thing started to happen within days. The tone began to change. People started asking questions. Wait, did he really bulldoze a man's house? For views? Was that even legal? Where was the warning? Nathan Kells' legal team sprang into action like they always did. Clean suits, slick smiles, practiced damage control. They found Eli sitting in a folding chair outside what used to be his front steps, sipping weak diner coffee from a styrofoam cup. He was surrounded by broken plaster and burnt photo albums like they were sacred ruins. They handed him a check, a big one, 7 figures, no negotiation, no strings, just disappear. They also threw in a luxury condo, downtown of course, high-rise with a gym and doorman. Clean, modern, efficient, the exact opposite of Eli's home. He looked at it, read it, folded it neatly. Then he gave it back. I'm not sure they were ready for that. Eli wasn't trying to be defiant. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He simply said, "There's no dollar amount that replaces my wife's journal." They blinked. "Excuse me?" She wrote in it every day for 38 years, told me everything she was too shy to say out loud. "It's gone now, but thank you." The lawyers tried again, pointing to the number. Eli shook his head. "There was a chair I built for her when we found out we couldn't have more kids. It took me 4 months. She rocked our son in that chair every night until he passed. That chair survived more storms than I can count. You called it trash. They didn't know what to say." "And you see that lot over there?" he asked, pointing to the vacant space next to his old property. "That's where my boy played with his wooden train set. Made it himself. Painted it red because he wanted to drive fire engines. It was still under the stairs, probably smashed to pieces now." There was a silence. Eli just looked down at the dirt, hands in his pockets. Some things don't fit in a checkbook. The clip of that moment, just a shaky iPhone video, spread like wildfire. No filters, no edits, just one old man refusing to sell his soul for 7 zeros. And something shifted. Suddenly people weren't laughing anymore. The comments started changing. The news picked it up. Anchors called it a modern-day David and Goliath. Think pieces appeared overnight. Psychologists weighed in on grief. Journalists dug into Nathan Kell's past. And across the country, strangers began mailing packages addressed to Eli Mercer, the house that should have stayed. No postage, no address, just that. But somehow they still made it. Inside, photographs, handwritten letters, old music boxes. One guy even sent a handmade replica of a wooden red train, because maybe it wasn't just Eli's house that got bulldozed. Maybe it reminded everyone what it feels like to lose something irreplaceable and be told it's just stuff. And Eli? He wasn't begging, he wasn't suing, he wasn't even angry. He just wanted someone to say out loud, what we did was wrong. But Nathan? He hadn't said a word. Yet. For a man who lived in glass, both literally and metaphorically, Nathan Kells had never imagined what it felt like to be seen. Not admired, not envied, seen. That was new, and it was terrifying. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He was used to a little noise. Online backlash was like weather. You waited it out, maybe threw a charity donation at it, and things blew over. His PR team told him the same. It'll pass, just a 72-hour storm, stay quiet. But this wasn't passing. Outside his building, people started gathering. Not fans, protesters. Small at first, some college kids with cardboard signs, a few local journalists, a woman in a wheelchair who'd grown up on Eli's street. They didn't chant, they didn't scream, they stood. One held a sign that said, "You crushed a life, not a house." By day 5, the plaza was full. Nathan tried to keep working, he really did, but he couldn't look out his own windows without seeing that sign. Then the leaks started. At first, it was little things, anonymous posts from former interns talking about his culture of cruelty. Then came a video from 3 years ago. Nathan, caught on a hot mic, mocking a janitor for his accent. Then another clip, this time from a boardroom meeting, where he called a disabled customer a bad look for the brand. They hit like dominoes. Each leak shattered another sliver of the image Nathan had so carefully curated. The man who once walked red carpets and keynoted tech summits was now the centerpiece of a growing media frenzy titled "The CEO Who Bulldozed a Life." His sponsors pulled out one by one, his stock tanked overnight, and his wife, Danielle, who had once sat proudly beside him at every gala, stopped speaking to him altogether. He found her standing in the kitchen one night, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "You haven't said sorry," she murmured. He blinked. "I told the lawyers to issue a statement." "Not a statement, Nathan," she turned to face him. "An apology." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Somewhere deep in his brain, the wiring that once separated pride from accountability had fused a long time ago. She watched him for a long moment. Then she walked upstairs, packed a weekend bag, and left. The next morning, graffiti covered the parking garage of his headquarters. "This isn't PR, it's a person. Apologize or disappear. Even ghosts leave footprints." Nathan told security to scrub it. They did. It came back every single night. The building had 42 floors, but suddenly Nathan felt very, very small. And that glass office, it didn't feel like a throne anymore. It felt like a cage. For the first time in his life, Nathan Kells was no longer the man above the city. He was the man on display. And behind that face, the one he wore so well for cameras, shareholders and spotlights, something began to crack. It was only a matter of time before it shattered. The meeting wasn't part of any PR strategy. It wasn't on the calendar. No handlers, no flashbulbs, no hashtags. It just happened. The pressure had been building for weeks between the protests, the viral clips, the silence in his own home, and the late-night headlines branding him as the bulldozer billionaire. Nathan Kells finally agreed to meet Eli Mercer face to face. He didn't know what to expect. He arrived in a tailored suit, clean shave, cuffed sleeves, a calculated attempt at casual. Eli was already there, sitting on the edge of a cinder block near the ruins, waiting like he'd been there all morning. Nathan opened with something that was supposed to sound like empathy. "I wanted to talk, man to man." Eli didn't stand, didn't shake his hand. He simply nodded to a corner of the rubble, half covered by a tarp. "I found something." Nathan followed him. The air was thick with the scent of old ash and broken time, and there, nestled inside a dented metal box, was a music box, its painted wood chipped, a corner burned, the winding key slightly bent. Eli picked it up with trembling fingers and turned the key once. A soft, shaky lullaby filled the space between them. Not loud, not perfect, but alive. "My wife gave this to me on our 25th anniversary, Eli said quietly, not looking at Nathan. "Said she picked it because it didn't play perfectly. Said it reminded her of us." Nathan looked down, unsure if he should speak. "She'd play it when the world got too loud. After we lost our son. After chemo. When she couldn't sleep." Eli gently closed the lid. This survived, somehow. Then he looked up. His eyes, those tired, aching eyes, met Nathan's for the first time. "You called this junk?" Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. And in that moment, surrounded by concrete dust and memories, something inside him cracked, not dramatically, not all at once. Just a quiet, undeniable fracture. One he couldn't PR his way out of. Later that night, Nathan tried to sleep. He couldn't. He laid in bed staring at the ceiling, heart racing with a pressure he couldn't name. When he finally drifted off, the dreams came fast. A house collapsing, frame by frame. Echoes of digital laughter blending with the whine of machinery. The music box's lullaby playing too slow, off-key, stretched out like a scream underwater. He woke with a jolt, sweating, breathing like he'd run a marathon. He got up and checked his phone. Notifications flooded in, thousands of comments on every post. But they weren't praise. This isn't redemption, it's reckoning. You can't undo grief with a check. He lost everything. You lost a follower count. For the first time, Nathan didn't scroll. He didn't block. He didn't draft a statement. He just sat there, alone, listening to silence, feeling something he'd long forgotten how to feel. Not fear, not anger, not even guilt. It was something simpler. He was no longer in control. And he knew it. He didn't tell anyone he was going back. No cameras, no entourage, no press release, just a hoodie, a ball cap pulled low, and a quiet return to the place he once flattened for laughs. The lot looked different now, not just because the wreckage had settled, but because something had changed in the air. It wasn't silence, it was reverence. A few volunteers were still sifting through the debris. Not because anyone asked them to, but because some things deserved to be searched for. Memories, pieces of a life, whatever scraps time hadn't erased. Nathan didn't speak. He just joined in. At first, no one recognized him. He was just another set of hands in the dust. He pulled boards, moved bricks, coughed through the ash. His polished skin cracked. His manicured hands bled. It was almost enough to make him feel human again. Hours passed, days maybe. Time blurred into sunrises and dust clouds. And then one morning, Nathan found something wedged between the baseboards of a shattered crawl space. A metal tin, rusted at the hinges, nearly missed it. He opened it. Inside was an envelope, yellowed and soft at the corners. It had Eli's name written in a child's handwriting, lopsided and proud. Nathan stared at it for a long time before he slid his finger under the flap. The letter was short, written in pencil, folded with care. Dear Dad, thank you for teaching me how to build things and how to cry when it hurts, but still keep going. When I grow up, I want to be a man like you. Love, Jesse. Jesse, Eli's son, the one who passed. Nathan sat in the dirt, surrounded by splinters and insulation and the bones of what once was a home. And he broke. Not the kind of breaking you see on screens, not screaming or punching the ground or some poetic meltdown, just a quiet collapse, one breath, then another. And then the tears came, without noise, because Nathan Kells was a father once too, a long time ago, before the IPOs, before the 30 under 30 lists, before he lost weekends to conference calls and let birthdays be rescheduled, before he told himself that success required sacrifice without ever noticing what he was sacrificing first. He remembered a photo buried deep in a drawer somewhere of his daughter with her arms around his neck, wearing a birthday crown she made from glitter and glue. He couldn't remember the last time he spoke to her. He couldn't remember the sound of her voice. That night, Nathan didn't go home. He didn't even go to his penthouse. He checked into a tiny roadside motel and turned off his phone. The world kept spinning, but he stopped. He declined interviews, ignored legal updates. His PR team called 27 times in 3 days. He didn't answer once. The headlines moved on to something new. Another scandal, another face. And slowly, Nathan disappeared from the public eye. But beneath the noise, beneath the algorithms and the outrage, something quiet had begun. A man had gone looking for pieces of another man's life and found pieces of his own. The headlines moved on first. That's how it always goes. Public outrage has a shelf life. 1 week you're the face of corporate cruelty. The next, you're a trivia question. The internet needed a new villain. Nathan Kells was old news. He didn't mind. By the time the articles slowed and the tweets dried up, Nathan had already made the decision. He was done. Not just with the company, but with the life that had made him forget what it meant to feel something without needing a metric to measure it. He sold the mansion in the hills, the one with the glass elevator and the koi pond and the kitchen no one ever cooked in. Gone. He resigned from his CEO position without a press conference. No goodbye party. Just a silent walk out the back of the building, no security detail, no fanfare. And then? He vanished. For a long time, no one knew where he went. No sightings, no Instagram posts, no leaks. It was like he'd walked off stage and let the curtain fall behind him. But one spring afternoon, something quiet started happening at the corner of 12th and Hanover. The lot had sat empty for months. Some people thought Eli would move away. Others assumed the land would be bought up, paved over, and forgotten. But that's not how Eli Mercer worked. One day, a delivery truck dropped off a stack of reclaimed wood. Then a neighbor came by with a wheelbarrow, another with power tools. Word spread quietly through the community. Eli was rebuilding, not a replica, not a luxury house, just a home. Piece by piece, memory by memory, with hands older than most of the wood they carried. It was slow, but steady, and it wasn't just his hands doing the work. Neighbors came, friends, volunteers, even a few strangers who remembered the story and showed up with nothing but good boots and better intentions. Then one evening, as the sun was slipping below the rooftops, a man showed up. No limo, no camera crew, just a pair of jeans, work gloves, and a quiet nod. Nathan. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't offer an apology, not right away. He just picked up a hammer and started working. Eli saw him, of course, paused for a moment, said nothing, then passed him a board and got back to measuring. That was how it started. No speeches, no confessions, just two men, one who'd lost everything and one who had everything and lost himself, working side by side under a sky that didn't care about power or status. Days passed, then weeks. They didn't talk much. Sometimes they ate lunch in silence. Sometimes they didn't eat at all. But slowly Nathan learned how to use his hands again. He learned how to listen. He learned that building something with care takes longer than destroying it with pride. And Eli didn't forget. He didn't forgive exactly, not in some cinematic way, but he let him stay, he let him help. And maybe that was something more powerful than forgiveness, because this wasn't about a house anymore. It was about respect. And that, finally, was something money couldn't buy. The house wasn't large, it didn't shine, but it stood. Each nail, each beam, each crooked corner held a different kind of meaning now. It didn't try to be what it once was. It didn't pretend to forget what had happened. It remembered. The siding was a soft, faded blue, just like Eli's wife once dreamed of. The porch sagged slightly on the left, but no one fixed it. The wood inside smelled faintly of sawdust and time. And on a modest little shelf, near the living room window, sat two things: the music box and the letter, carefully framed, not with elegance, but with reverence. Eli didn't show it to visitors. It wasn't a conversation piece. It was a part of the home, something sacred, meant to be felt more than seen. Nathan didn't live there. He didn't ask. He rented a small room 2 blocks away, above a bakery that smelled of yeast and cinnamon in the mornings. He walked to the community center every day, sleeves rolled up, teaching woodworking to teenagers who didn't care about resumes or reputation. Most of them didn't even know who he used to be. He never told them. One rainy afternoon, Eli stood on the porch with 2 chipped mugs, the kind that didn't match anything in the cupboard. One held black coffee. The other held silence. Nathan took the cup and followed Eli inside. They didn't speak much. Eli nodded to the shelf once. Nathan looked once. That was enough. They sat at the kitchen table. No cameras, no audience, just the sound of quiet breathing and the soft ticking of an old clock on the wall. 2 men, one passed, no need for words. The rain tapped gently on the windows as they drank, and the house remembered.